Coming up, President Yoon celebrates his first Christmas as South Korean president. He marks the occasion with a visit to his old church together with the First Lady. While there, he says the country's constitution reflects the words of the Bible. For the first Christmas in 3 years, churches in South Korea open without a limit on the number of people allowed in per mass or service. At the Vatican, Pope Francis uses his Christmas address to pray for the victims of war around the world. Plus, Russian President Vladimir Putin on Christmas Day says Russia is willing to negotiate with Ukraine on ending the war. But Ukraine and Western nations insist they aren't buying Putin's words. Good morning. Welcome to New Day at Arirang. We begin this morning as over the weekend, churches and cathedrals across Korea held Christmas services and Mass with no restrictions on the number of participants for the first time since the COVID pandemic began 3 years ago. They all had one message in common: peace on earth with ongoing conflicts and confrontations. Our editor-in-chief, Moon Gon-young, leads us off.
It's below -10 degrees Celsius outside as this year's Christmas Mass begins with a ceremony welcoming baby Jesus born in a poor, lowly stable. At the National Cathedral of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Seoul, Archbishop Peter Chung-soon-taek took the opportunity to highlight the need to overcome the growing polarization in our society today.
Looking beyond conflict and confrontation, we need to learn to acknowledge, respect, and listen to differences.
This was the first in 3 years that there were no restrictions on the congregation size. As we should pursue greater value than the value immediate to us, the Archbishop urged everyone to seek a greater peace between the two Koreas and furthermore peace around the world. Cardinal Lazaro Yuhung-sik, back home for the holidays from the Vatican, also presided over a Christmas Mass in Asan, south of Seoul, and prayed for the swift end of war across the global community. Over in the Vatican, Pope Francis led the world's Catholics into Christmas, saying, in an apparent reference to the war in Ukraine and other conflicts, that the level of greed and hunger for power was such that some wanted to consume even their neighbors.
How many wars and in how many places, even today, are human dignity and freedom treated with contempt? As always, the principal victims of this human greed are the weak and vulnerable. This Christmas, too, as in the case of Jesus, a world ravenous for money, power, and pleasure does not make room for the little ones, for so many unborn, poor, and forgotten children. I think above all of the children devoured by war, poverty, and injustice.
The Protestant community in Korea has also been carrying out Christmas services and celebrations with larger congregations offering 6 to 7 services on Christmas Day without any limits on the number of participants. Moon Gon-young, Arirang News.
South Korea's first couple spent Christmas Day taking part in a Christmas service at a church in Seoul where President Yoon attended as an elementary student. There, the president met with his childhood teachers who also worked as scout leaders when Yoon was a Boy Scout 50 years ago. Yoon reminisced those days, saying it felt like he had traveled back all those years on a time machine. He also told the congregation that the Korean constitutional system, its order, and institutions are based largely on Bible-aligned principles, adding that the civilization and order that we enjoy today are derived from the scripture. President Yoon vowed that as the first thing about love thy neighbor is to work hard and fulfill your responsibilities. He, too, will do his very best to fulfill the responsibilities of a president. Just a few days after Putin spoke of Moscow's willingness to end the war in Ukraine, Putin again on Christmas Day said Russia is willing to negotiate with all parties involved in the war about acceptable solutions. Despite Moscow's repeated comments that it's open to negotiations, Ukraine and its Western allies suspect that such claims are a ploy to buy time. Our Lee Ji-woo reports.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has said that Russia is ready to negotiate with all parties involved in the war in Ukraine about acceptable solutions, and at the same time accused Ukraine and its Western allies of refusing to negotiate. Speaking with Russia One State Television in an interview which aired on Christmas Day, Putin also said that he believes Russia is acting in the right direction, defending its national interests. This comment comes after Putin said on Thursday that Moscow wants an end to the war in Ukraine.
Our goal is not to spin the flywheel of military conflict, but, on the contrary, to end this war. We are striving for this and will continue to strive.
Putin also added that ending the war would inevitably involve a diplomatic solution. Those comments came a day after President Volodymyr Zelensky visited the White House and U.S. President Joe Biden promised Zelensky continued U.S. support. Despite Moscow's repeated comments that it is open to negotiations, Kyiv and its allies suspect that such claims are a ploy to buy time after a series of Russian defeats and retreats during the war in Ukraine. John Kirby, the White House spokesperson, says Putin has shown absolutely zero indication that he's willing to negotiate to end the war. Kirby told reporters during an online briefing that everything Putin is doing bespeaks a man who wants to continue to visit violence upon the Ukrainian people and escalate the war. He also said the White House was open to dialogue only if Putin showed seriousness about negotiations. Lee Si-hu, Arirang News.
The South Korean government's 2023 budget was passed last week late by the National Assembly after the two main parties reached a compromise. This was significant because it's the Yoon administration's first fiscal year, and the ruling People Power Party, despite having the minority, wanted to make sure the fiscal plan reflected the administration's policy goals. So let's break this down with Professor Park Sang-in from Graduate School of Public Administration at Seoul National University. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning.
So now, part of it was lowering the corporate tax by a percentage point. Is this a win for the ruling PPP?
Well, it is a compromise between the ruling party and opposition party, rather than a win for one of them. The initial budget plan by the government includes tax cut only for highest rate by 3%. However, the opposition party argued that the tax cut will be tax cut for the super rich and for large profitable companies only. So the compromise satisfied the opposition party because it includes the tax cut for all the companies by 1%. On the other hand, the ruling party's agenda for the corporate tax cut to stimulate the economy. In that sense, it is a compromise rather than a win for one of them.
Now, another aspect is that National Assembly was able to lower the total budget compared to the government's initial proposal, and by 6% compared to this year's budget. Is this a step forward in lowering the nation's fiscal debt?
Well, I don't think so. The fiscal budget cut was a consequence of the rushed, compromise and the negotiation between two parties, rather than intended one for the lowering trend of the national debt. Probably next year we may have a supplementary budget for more spending because there will be general election in 2024.
Right. Now, there's a lot to the budget bill, and I wanted to bring this time to ask you which part about it stood out to you most, considering the fact that it's the first budget of a conservative administration.
Well, the first budget of the Yoon administration actually indicates that the so-called trickle-down effect is the main agenda, economic agenda of the administration. But I'm personally skeptical that trickle-down effect will be effective in Korea today. In the Lee Myung-bak administration, actually, the government to pursue the same kind of the policy by lowering corporate taxes and to stimulate the economy. However, I guess most experts, including myself, will agree that there will be no significant effect of that policy anymore. So Korea is now in the transition from catch-up economy to the innovative economy. So for the innovative economy, the value addition, creation of the value are caused by the challengers and innovations rather than the investment of the incumbent. So the data and the theory all indicates that the trickle-down effect is not anymore valid in Korea. So in that sense, I'm worried that the government has kind of outdated kind of stance for economic policy in general.
Now, we have a couple more minutes, so I wanted to ask you another question. From the reports, we know that the amount of national defense budget has grown from this administration. What do you take on that? Is this a collective response as the North Korea ramps up provocations, do you think?
Yeah, I don't think, we don't actually have to spend more money on a defense budget anymore if we have ability to control the situation, peace situation between South and North Korea. So, in my personal opinion, the government have spent more efforts on making the peace and rather than spending more money on the military expenses. So, as you already indicated, that the budget situation and the fiscal debt situation in Korea is worsening. So, spending more money on the military purpose is not a good idea in this situation.
Well, thank you so much for your insights this morning, Professor, and I hope you have a great day and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, too. Thank you.
A few weeks ago, to mark the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, we took a look back at the history of Korean Braille and how it's being taught here in the country. Following up on that, our Song Yujin sheds light on how braille-friendly South Korea is.
Just like any other commuter in South Korea, Han Hae-kyung takes the subway and bus to and from work every day. But because of her visual impairment, using public transport is not always easy.
It's really hard to ride the bus because we don't know which bus has arrived, where the card reader and the exit door are. Subways are better because they have braille signs on handrails and screen doors. But some don't tell us which exit we're heading to or which direction of the subway we're waiting for. Some even have gum on them or have been attached upside down.
This made me wonder about the availability of Braille in South Korea. Out of around 250,000 visually impaired people in the country, around 10% use Braille. For these people, Braille is the only way they can independently access information. So I decided to visit places we go on a daily basis and check out how friendly they are to Braille users. And the result?
So I just took a look around at a convenience store and this grocery store, and at both places, it was really hard for me to find products with Braille labels on. Now, what this means is that despite a wide selection of goods, any visually impaired customer would find their choice limited to a much smaller range of items.
Apart from some food, drinks, and medicine, no other products were available in Braille, even necessities like sanitary pads. But items that did have labels in Braille had problems. In terms of food, only instant cup noodles and rice from certain brands had Braille guides. Some labels were really shallow to touch and understand. Most Braille signs on beverages lack detail. On cans of soda, it just says beverage or soft drink. On beer, it said only that, beer, and not which brand it was. This is because South Korea does not mandate the use of Braille on food and drink. It is only advised. Research done by the Korea Food Industry Association last year showed that 95% of around 160 food companies surveyed did not have Braille labels for their items. One expert says that bringing Braille into everyday life will be the key.
So please make Braille mainstream. Just don't make it something for university textbooks. Use it on jewelry, use it on playing cards, on Scrabble, use it in recipes. That goes on bottles of sauces for us.
Through these efforts, South Korea can become Braille-friendlier. Song Yu-jin, Arirang News.
South Korea's tangerine distributors are now using artificial intelligence to sort fruits into those which are good enough to be sold and those which are not. The new system is predicted to speed up the sorting process and drastically cut costs. Our Cho Sung-min has more.
The workers at this factory are busy sorting out tangerines that have just been brought in from local farms. Only the best fruit is picked out and packaged. What's special about this particular factory is that it uses artificial intelligence to carry out this task. The system detects any physical flaws a tangerine might have using over 1.98 million tangerine images stored in its archives. It evaluates tangerines' quality by 17 different categories, which has been 99% more accurate than when the work was done manually.
When the fruits are picked manually, it's around or less than 90% accurate at best. Based on our AI's confusion matrix system, its accuracy is around 99%.
Besides being more accurate, the work can be done at a much speedier pace, as each system can evaluate up to 33,000 tangerines per hour. As a result, farms using this technology can finish the job that initially needed 8 workers with only 2.
Using the AI machine helps me cut labor costs by a lot and has been extremely helpful in maintaining high quality.
The system was developed thanks to the support of the Korea Agriculture Technology Promotion Agency. The agency plans to continue improving the system's accuracy and supply the technology to around 20 different centers, including local farms and produce distribution hubs across Jeju Island by 2025. Cho Sung-min, Arirang News.
When fruit trees get infected with a virus, both the quality and yield of their fruit decreases, hurting farmers' bottom line. South Korea's agricultural researchers have developed new types of disease-resistant seedlings and plan to distribute them to more farmers, our Yoon reports.
The apple trees on this farm not only look healthy, but are full of apples. This is the result of a new kind of apple seedling that was planted a few years ago. The trees themselves have grown noticeably healthier. Not only are the large apples more marketable, but because they've grown from seedlings that are resistant to disease, production is up 30%, increasing farmers' profits.
The disease-resistant seedlings have better color, make better fruit, and are robust. I think they're much better than normal apple seedlings.
These disease-resistant seedlings have been treated with heat and other methods to protect them against 17 specific viruses that are most damaging to apples. The Rural Development Administration has been cultivating these seedlings as a trial for the past 2 years. Results show that the fruits of these seedlings are up to 52% larger, and the color of their skin is up to 80% richer.
Virus-infected trees not only produce poor quality fruits, but also have lower yields, causing the farm's income to take a hit. This makes the supply of these disease-resistant seedlings essential.
Currently, there are disease-resistant seedlings for 5 fruits: apples, pears, peaches, grapes, and tangerines. The Rural Development Administration hopes to run trial cultivations of these seedlings, which also requires training farmers about handling these new types of plants. Yoon, Arirang News.
For a look at news from around the world, we now turn to our Lee Seung-jae, who's standing by at the Arirang News Center. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Now let's start off in Afghanistan, where a number of NGOs are going to be halting work after the Taliban issued a ban on female staff.
That's right, Toyan. 4 international aid agencies said Sunday they were suspending their humanitarian programs in Afghanistan in response to the Taliban's latest order to stop female employees from working. Now, Save the Children, Norwegian Refugee Council, and CARE International said in a joint statement that they were suspending their programs as they await further clarity on the order, while the fourth agency, the International Rescue Committee, said it's suspending its services in the country, citing similar reasons. Now, the suspensions come at a time when more than half the population relies on humanitarian aid during the winter. Now, on Saturday, the Taliban ordered all local and foreign NGOs not to let their female staff work until further notice because some women were not abiding to Islamic dress code. Now, busloads of migrants were dropped off at the home of U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris on Christmas Eve. Video showed people who were lightly dressed for temperatures as low as -8 degrees Celsius getting off and onto buses outside of the Naval Observatory. It's not yet clear who was responsible for sending the buses to Harris's residence, but migrants were similarly dispatched there by Texas Governor Greg Abbott in September. Now, previously, several Republican governors have been sending migrants to northern states as a sign of protest. According to local reports, some of the migrants were given blankets and were taken to local shelters and a church. Now, King Charles III delivered his first ever Christmas message on Sunday, paying tribute to his late mother, Queen Elizabeth II. The king delivered his pre-recorded message standing in St. George's Chapel in Windsor, where the Queen and Prince Philip are both buried. He also had a separate pre-recorded video message broadcast as part of a Westminster Abbey carol service, where he paid tribute to the public sector and healthcare workers, charities, and religious institutions. His message ended with a rendition of O Little Town of Bethlehem. And finally, staying with Christmas, it's been a terrible year for Ukrainians, but they kept their holiday spirits alive as citizens in Kyiv on Sunday sang Christmas carols inside a metro station during an air raid. Many were also wearing Ukrainian folklore costumes. Now, traditionally, Ukrainian Christians mostly celebrate Christmas in January. However, this year, many are celebrating the holiday on December 25th, as Ukraine's main Orthodox church has broken its ties with Moscow. Air raid sirens wailed in Kyiv and other Ukrainian cities on Christmas.
Good morning. The cold snap has eased just a bit compared to the Christmas weekend. In fact, the Hamgang River has frozen over for the first time this season on Sunday, which came 16 days earlier than usual. I mean, last year the river didn't freeze at all, so it has been a very tough winter for sure this year. Cold wave alerts remain in place across much of Korea. It feels like it is below -10 degrees in Seoul, so please stay bundled up. The west and central regions are having a dusty start and will see high levels of dust for most of the day. But the capital and Jeollabuk-do province will see bad air in the morning hours. Skies will be mostly sunny with highs that are slightly higher than Sunday at 1 degree Celsius here in Seoul, Daegu topping out at 5 degrees Celsius. Meanwhile, the East Coast continues to be under dry weather alerts. There will be light snow on Wednesday from dawn to the afternoon, spreading to the west coast on Thursday with colder than average temperatures expected this week as well. With that in mind, here's a look at the weather conditions around the globe.
And that wraps up today's New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for Tuesday's edition at the same time. Please stay with Arirang News, though, for more updates throughout the day. Have a lovely day or evening wherever you are, and take care.